In everything I've done, Sound of Music, Blood Brothers, the R thing, R. There's no R in this at all. I mean, she is weird. Wonderful children, and we have 2 marvelous grandchildren as well. We still live together, but he has his own life and I have mine.
She was one of the first female stars of the international pop wave, the first British woman to reach #1 in the US during the rock era, with the hit Downtown echoing through the height of Beatlemania. But if you think Petula Clark's life was all about hit songs and Grammy awards, you're missing a story far more thrilling than her music. She was once a little girl singing in World War II bomb shelters, and at 90, she's still touring, still singing, and still loving after a 63-year marriage that never ended in divorce, but has been a separation for over 2 decades. This is the journey of Petula Clark, not just a music legend, but a symbol of survival through war, prejudice, and time. A story no one has fully told, until now. Petula Clark was born on November 15, 1932 in Ewell, Surrey, a small town in southern England. Her birth name was Sally Alwyn Clark. Both of her parents were nurses at a psychiatric hospital in Epsom. The family had Welsh roots, and her childhood was closely tied to the coal mining town of Aberconade, where her grandfather had once worked as a miner. But that childhood didn't unfold in peace. When World War II broke out, Clark grew up amid air raid sirens, bombing raids, and frantic dashes to bomb shelters with her sister. She later recalled how, on some nights, the rumble of bombs from the ground would shake the whole house, and in those moments, the only thing that calmed a frightened child was the quiet song playing in her mind. At the age of 16, her mother passed away after a long illness. For Clark, it wasn't just a loss. It was a wound that never truly healed. Even years later, standing before thousands of fans, she still remembered the emptiness of returning home and realizing her mother would no longer be waiting at the door. Petula, her father coined the name from 2 of his former girlfriends, Pet and Ulla, a strange little joke that ended up becoming the name that would follow her throughout her career. In 1939, she performed in public for the first time at the Collier's Arms pub among Welsh coal miners. But the true turning point came in 1942 in an air raid shelter beneath the Criterion Theatre in London. Clark was just 9 years old. She and other children were recording messages for relatives fighting at the front when the air raid siren went off. As panic spread, a producer called out for someone to sing to calm the mood. Clark stood up. She sang "Mighty Like a Rose," a voice so clear that the entire room fell silent. They recorded the performance on the spot, and that was the day Petula Clark stepped onto a path with no return. Her career didn't begin with stage lights, but with the flickering glow of war. Not with applause, but with the wail of sirens. And it was in that harsh, chaotic setting that a new star quietly took shape, resilient and steady amid panic and ruin. After that moment, singing amid the bombs in a BBC air raid shelter in 1942, Petula Clark quickly became one of wartime Britain's most beloved faces. Between 1942 and 1945, before she even turned 13, she had performed in over 500 shows for the troops. She was called Britain's Shirley Temple, not just because of her youthful looks, but because of the spirit she embodied, a small light in dark times. Many soldiers carried photos of Clark with them, even pasted them on their tanks before heading into battle, as a symbol of home and of the goodness worth defending. Clark didn't just perform on radio. She toured alongside Julie Andrews, sang for Winston Churchill, King George VI, and Field Marshal Montgomery. Despite having no formal training, she had a natural gift for mimicking voices, doing spot-on impressions of Vera Lynn, Carmen Miranda, and Sophie Tucker, making audiences laugh and cry in equal measure. At 13, Clark became one of the few artists of the time to have her own television program. From Petula Clark to Pet's Parlor at age 18, she was not only a singer but also a stage host. This laid the foundation for her image as a versatile entertainer, one who could perform and command the stage, something few women of her era were doing. In 1944, an unexpected film opportunity came when director Maurice Elvey spotted her at a performance at Royal Albert Hall. Though she had never acted before, she was cast in the lead role of Medal for the General. Her portrayal of a clever orphan girl made an immediate impression. In the following years, Clark appeared in a series of films including I Know Where I'm Going, London Town, The Card, with Alec Guinness, and the Huggett series, a family-oriented film series seen as a precursor to British television sitcoms. In 1949, she stepped into the recording studio. Her single, The Little Shoemaker, became an unexpected hit, reaching the top 10 in the UK and going #1 in Australia, a rare feat for a young female artist at the time. It marked her first breakthrough on the international stage. Clark then signed with the label Polygon, partially funded by her father. Later, when Polygon merged into Pi Records, she became the label's leading artist for 2 decades. This was the period in which Clark's musical identity took shape, accessible, multilingual, and always attuned to the popular taste. From a little girl singing through wartime to a voice that dominated radio, television, and film, Petula Clark proved that a strong beginning doesn't rely on luck. It demands endurance. And she had that from the very start. From being Britain's wartime child sensation, Petula Clark entered adulthood amid a saturated music market. Just as everything seemed to plateau, an unexpected turn took her beyond national borders and completely reshaped her career path. In 1957, Petula Clark was invited to perform at the Paris Olympia, the most prestigious music venue in France at the time. She arrived in Paris in less than ideal condition, suffering from the flu, exhausted, her voice weak. Yet despite her poor physical state, her performance brought the notoriously tough Parisian audience to their feet. That kind of reaction was rare at the Olympia. The next morning, she was invited to the offices of Vogue Records. They offered her a recording contract in French. The problem was, Petula Clark didn't speak French, but instead of declining, she said yes. She learned to sing by reading phonetic transcriptions of each word without understanding the meaning. It was a bold move, but one that marked the beginning of her international career. At the label's headquarters, Clark met Claude Wolfe, the PR executive assigned to the project. They had spoken for only a few minutes, but it was enough for her to sense that she wasn't just signing with a company, she was meeting someone who would walk beside her for a very long journey. Clark agreed, and within just a few months, she began releasing songs in French, German, and Italian. Not mere translations, but original lyrics tailored to fit each culture. For a British female artist to sign an official recording contract in France during the 1950s was exceptionally rare. Even rarer was the way she quickly won over audiences across Europe, audiences often skeptical of foreign performers. But Clark wasn't there to translate. She came to co-create. Her approach to localizing music, rather than imposing an English style on foreign markets, earned her the perception of being an artist unique to each country she sang for. From a flu-stricken performance, Petula Clark launched 2 parallel journeys, an international music career spanning continents, and a lifelong bond with the man who would become her manager and husband for over 6 decades. It wasn't planned. It was a moment of fate, and Clark did not let it pass her by. From the late 1950s to the early 1960s, Petula Clark became one of the few artists to record and release music simultaneously in French, German, Italian, and Spanish, at a time when multilingualism remained a major barrier for international pop singers. Hits like Chariot, Ya Ya Twist, Romeo, and Sailor spread across Europe, transforming her from a British star into a continental pop icon. What set Clark apart was that she didn't merely record translations. She was directly involved in rewriting lyrics and adjusting content so that each version reflected local cultural nuances. It wasn't translation, it was reinvention. While many of her British contemporaries remained confined to the domestic market, Clark actively localized her music and embraced the challenge of connecting with audiences region by region. In Germany, her recording of Monsieur sold over 1 million copies, setting a record for a foreign artist. In France, Ya Ya Twist became the only twist hit by a non-French female singer to spark a major wave. At one point, Clark charted simultaneously in the UK, France, and Germany, a rare feat, especially for a solo performer. At the time, many believed that singing in German or French would lower an artist's prestige. Clark defied that view and turned what was once seen as less classy into her signature. She didn't just bring British music to the world, she brought herself into the world by learning languages, embracing cultures, and making music like a native. In 1964, while at the peak of her career in Europe, Petula Clark was visited in Paris by composer Tony Hatch. He brought with him a demo track, no lyrics yet, built around a few simple chords, inspired by a recent trip to New York. Clark listened and frowned. She didn't find it remarkable. The song, as she would later describe, was too American, too simple, not in line with the style I was building in France. What few people know is that Downtown was originally written with the American R&B group The Drifters in mind. When it became unclear whether they would take the song, Hatch offered it to Clark as a backup option. A second-choice suggestion. But that very second choice would go on to make history. Clark reluctantly agreed to record it. The session took place in October at Pi Studios in London, and things quickly went wrong. There was a power outage midway, the equipment malfunctioned, the atmosphere was stifling, and she nearly walked out. "Maybe this song just isn't right for me," Clark later recalled. But Hatch wouldn't give up. She kept her word, stayed until the end, and the final take was completed just minutes before the studio shut down for the day. Neither of them could have predicted what was about to happen. Soon after, a Warner Brothers executive happened to visit London, heard the recording, and immediately purchased the rights to release it in the US. Downtown was launched in America, before any promotional campaign began in the UK. On January 23, 1965, Downtown reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making Petula Clark the first British woman to top the US charts during the rock era, at a time when the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were dominating everything. The song didn't just carry her name across the Atlantic, it earned her first Grammy Award for Best Rock and Roll Recording. The irony? The song she nearly rejected, recorded in doubt and amid technical failures, became a global explosion. An American-sounding track, sung by a British voice, blurred all market boundaries. After Downtown, Clark was no longer a British artist singing in America. She became the first international performer that American audiences embraced as one of their own. Nearly 40 years later, Downtown was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, cementing its place not just as a hit, but as a piece of American musical heritage. A long resonating detonation, a recording that nearly didn't happen, but forever transformed Petula Clark's career and legacy. After Downtown, Petula Clark's career didn't just enter a new chapter, it exploded on a scale she had never known. In just 4 short years, she landed 15 top 40 hits on the Billboard charts, a remarkable feat that few British artists, especially women, achieved during the height of Beatlemania. Songs like I Know a Place, Don't Sleep in the Subway, A Sign of the Times, and My Love, which hit #1 in 1966, not only ruled the airwaves but also earned her another Grammy Award. Even more intriguing is the fact that many of those hits almost didn't get recorded. My Love was a song Clark once dismissed as bland, and This Is My Song, written by none other than Charlie Chaplin, was initially rejected by her for being far too sentimental. But when she agreed to give them a chance, both tracks became global sensations, touching millions. Petula Clark didn't chase trends. She chose songs with emotional weight and individual character, even when that went against the market. And that's precisely how she survived in a decade where trends shifted by the month. Beyond her voice on vinyl, Clark became an international television star. She appeared on many of America's biggest shows: The Ed Sullivan Show, Dean Martin Show, Hollywood Palace, Hullabaloo, Shindig. Each appearance made a statement. A British middle-aged woman, not styled to fit Hollywood's beauty standards with no tabloid antics, yet she owned the stage and earned a place in American popular culture. Between 1964 and 1968, Clark was no longer just a British phenomenon. She had become the face of international pop through her voice, her resilience, and the sheer authenticity of who she was. Petula Clark wasn't just a voice on vinyl. She became an international television phenomenon in the 1960s. She was repeatedly invited to perform on America's most prestigious primetime shows, including The Ed Sullivan Show, The Dean Martin Show, Hollywood Palace, Shindig, and Hullabaloo, stages once reserved for rock stars, glamorous screen sirens, or homegrown comedians. Into that world stepped Clark, a British woman in her 30s, modestly dressed, no gimmicks, simply singing. And American audiences loved her from the very first moment, because she was different. Not sexy by Hollywood standards, not joking, not dancing for laughs. Clark sang with a raw beauty, intelligence, and sincerity. For millions of middle-aged American women at the time, she became their voice in the spotlight. No need to be forever young or dazzling, yet still capable of making an entire nation pause and listen. Even figures like Dean Martin, the host and quintessential man's man of American television, couldn't help but be charmed by Petula Clark. He often teased her during their duets, with a thinly veiled admiration. But Clark, as always, maintained a strictly professional distance. There was never a single scandal attached to her name, despite walking through some of the brightest stages of her time. What's even more impressive, Clark wasn't just a guest star. She was an artist with a strong creative voice. She once turned down offers to host her own American TV shows, despite the high fees, simply because she didn't want to be locked into a television persona, as she explained. Behind the scenes, she gave input on lighting, editing rhythms, and presentation style, injecting a distinctly European sensibility, elegance, depth, restraint. Some directors even said that if she hadn't become a singer, Petula Clark could have been a top-tier television producer. Her presence on television was more than proof of her fame. For Clark, it was a natural extension of her music career, where she won the public's heart by simply being herself. No gimmicks, no eternal youth, no fiery, belted-out vocals, just music, and an unshakable sense of self. While music launched Petula Clark to international stardom, her work on stage and screen proved she was far more than just a voice. She was a complete artist. In 1968, she took on the lead role in Finian's Rainbow, starring opposite Fred Astaire under the direction of a young Francis Ford Coppola. The film stirred controversy due to the age gap romance between their characters, but Clark's performance was widely praised and earned her a Golden Globe nomination. A year later, she solidified her status as an actress with Goodbye, Mr. Chips, 1969, playing alongside Peter O'Toole in a musical adaptation of the classic story. Not stopping at film, Clark ventured onto the Broadway stage and left a lasting impression. In 1981, she played Maria in The Sound of Music, performing 8 shows a week for 15 consecutive months. At age 49, she didn't pursue a youthful image. She embraced emotional depth and lived experience. Her next major role, Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard, 1995 to 1997, was a formidable challenge. A haunting, demanding character requiring both strong acting and commanding stage presence. Clark delivered both, becoming the oldest actress ever to take on the role in the West End and during the North American tour. In March 1968, a shocking event unfolded when Petula Clark taped her first American television special for NBC. Among her chosen guests was Harry Belafonte, a Grammy-winning black singer and a prominent figure in the civil rights movement. Together, they performed On the Path of Glory, an anti-war song written by Clark herself. As the lyrics reached their emotional peak, Clark, moved in the moment, gently placed her hand on Belafonte's arm. The gesture lasted just 3.5 seconds, but the aftermath would echo for decades. Chrysler, the show's main sponsor, reacted furiously. Doyle Lott, the company's advertising director, demanded the scene be cut. He feared that a white woman touching a black man on national primetime television would outrage Southern audiences and hurt car sales. Lott proposed reshooting the segment with no physical contact. Petula Clark refused. Claude Wolfe, her husband and the show's producer, also refused. Not only that, they erased 7 alternate takes and magnetically wiped all backup tapes, leaving the original as the only version available. NBC was cornered: either air the segment as it was or have nothing to broadcast. The program aired on April 8, 1968, just 4 days after the assassination of Martin Luther King, Jr. Millions of Americans watched. Some were outraged, many were deeply moved. NBC received thousands of letters from both sides. Chrysler came under enormous pressure, but the broadcast stood unchanged. Petula Clark issued no statement, no apology. But her actions, quiet, firm, and uncompromising, became a landmark moment in American television history. It wasn't the first time an interracial touch appeared on TV, but it was the first time a white woman had stood up to a corporate sponsor to preserve a moment of human connection uncensored. That touch wasn't a performance. It was a declaration of dignity, of art, and of the boundaries we refuse to cross for the sake of comfort. Behind the spotlight and career breakthroughs, Petula Clark's personal life was always kept private, but that doesn't mean it was uneventful. Before meeting Claude Wolfe, Petula had a deep and long-lasting relationship that spanned nearly a decade with pianist and songwriter Joe "Mr. Piano" Henderson. They met in 1947, just as Clark was beginning her recording career. Henderson wasn't just her partner. He was also her musical collaborator, helping shape her earliest recordings with the Polygon label. They were once seen as the perfect pair, both in music and in life. Rumors of marriage circulated widely, but as Clark's career expanded internationally, especially in France, cracks began to form. Why? Henderson struggled with being referred to as Mr. Petula Clark, a phrase that starkly revealed the imbalance in fame at the time. Eventually, he chose to end the relationship. Despite the breakup, the two remained friends and even continued working together briefly. In 1962, Henderson wrote, "There's Nothing More to Say," a gentle, wistful ballad believed to be his quiet farewell to Clark. Though she never publicly spoke about the romance, music, once again, became the only space where unspoken emotions found their voice. After her breakup with Joe Henderson, Petula Clark didn't rush into a new relationship, but fate intervened at the offices of Vogue Records in Paris in 1957. Claude Wolfe, the head of the label's communications department, entered her life unexpectedly. Though there was a language barrier at first, Clark didn't speak French and Wolfe didn't speak English, their mutual attraction quickly overcame it. They were married on June 8, 1961 in Bourg-la-Reine, France. Their union wasn't just a partnership between two individuals, it was a blending of cultures and careers. Wolfe became not only her husband, but also her devoted manager, helping Clark expand her international career, especially in France, where she became a music icon with hits like Chariot and C'est ma chanson. The couple had 3 children: Barbara, born in 1961 in London, Catherine, born in 1963 in Paris, and Patrick, born in 1972 in Geneva. They settled in Geneva in 1967, where Clark could enjoy a peaceful family life while balancing her demanding career. But life wasn't always smooth. Since the 1990s, Clark and Wolf lived separately, though they never divorced. She once shared, "We're no longer a romantic couple. He has his life and I have mine, but we still respect and care for each other." Clark also admitted that her busy career left her with a sense of guilt for not spending enough time with her children. She would often fly from Geneva to perform in Las Vegas and return immediately after the show to be with her family. "I wanted to be a mother, but I couldn't stop being myself," she once said. Claude Wolfe passed away on March 20th, 2024, at the age of 93. Clark wrote on social media, "Our hearts are heavy. This afternoon, Claude, my wonderful husband of so many years, passed away, leaving us with no words to express our sorrow." Their marriage, though marked by its share of challenges, stood as a testament to a bond built on mutual respect, support, and enduring love. In the glamorous world of entertainment, Petula Clark encountered her share of uncomfortable and at times dangerous situations behind the curtain. In the early 1970s, Petula Clark and her close friend, singer Karen Carpenter, had a free evening in Las Vegas. They decided to attend an Elvis Presley concert, both being admirers of the king. After the show, they were invited backstage, a privilege not granted to just anyone, especially since both Clark and Carpenter were at the height of their fame. They were led into Elvis's backstage suite at the Hilton Hotel. Clark recalls the initial atmosphere as quite relaxed, with everyone casually chatting in the outer lounge. Then Elvis emerged from the inner sanctum, midway through a costume change, and upon seeing the two female singers, his demeanor noticeably shifted. According to Clark, Elvis began to flirt with both of them. But this wasn't polite small talk. It was a direct sexual proposition. Specifically, he suggested the three of them have fun together that night. Clark recounts the moment with calm clarity and candor. He looked at us, smiled, and, playfully, but not really joking, said something that made it absolutely clear what he wanted. I knew this wasn't a place for Karen, and it wasn't for me either. Without hesitation, Clark took Karen's hand and gracefully exited the room. As they walked away, Elvis called after her, half joking, half serious, "One day, I'm gonna get you, Petula." Clark later said she wasn't frightened, but she was certainly uncomfortable, and especially felt a need to protect Karen, whom she considered too innocent and too sensitive for the predatory undercurrents of show business. But that night in Las Vegas wasn't the only time Petula Clark had to navigate a high-risk situation in the industry. Nearly a decade earlier, in 1965, at the very height of her career, she faced an even more serious test, one that she would not speak of for decades. In 1965, Clark was riding a wave of international success. Her records were topping charts around the world. But behind the glamour, she endured an experience she kept hidden for much of her life. A powerful Hollywood producer, considered an industry titan at the time, invited her to his hotel suite to discuss a major project. She suspected nothing. But once inside the luxurious room, she realized immediately, this wasn't a meeting. There was no script. No one else was there, just him, and an intent so clear it was terrifying, Clark recalled in a 2018 interview. She never named the man, but her voice dropped as she added, "I knew I had to leave. Immediately." She escaped unharmed physically, but the psychological mark was permanent. Rather than speak out, she chose silence. Silence, like so many women in the arts then, because she understood. To speak up meant not just losing a role, it could mean losing everything. It wasn't until more than 50 years later, amid the global Me Too movement, that Petula Clark decided to share her story. Not to accuse, but to stand in solidarity, to say she had seen, endured, and now stood with the women breaking the silence. "I'm not afraid anymore. There's no reason to be afraid anymore," she said. Petula Clark was never an artist who chased scandal or made headlines with shocking declarations, but she stands as living proof of another truth. Real influence comes from endurance, from adapting without losing oneself, from surviving across 8 decades without being swept away by trends. She has sold over 70 million records worldwide, an astonishing number in any era. She was the first British solo artist to win a Grammy in the rock era, with her breakout hit Downtown igniting the American market and I Know a Place continuing the momentum. In total, she earned 3 Grammy Awards and became a trailblazer for countless British female singers entering the US music scene. But Petula Clark is more than a voice. She is a songwriter, a film composer, a storyteller through melody. She wrote many beloved European hits like You're the One, Je chante doucement, L'agent secret, and tender French ballads like Bleu Blanc Rouge. She composed scores for French films such as À couteau tiré, Pétain, and La Bande à Bébel, projects that revealed a depth of artistry often overlooked by the public. Even in the face of harsh reactions like being booed in Montreal for singing in 2 languages, Clark chose to respond with music. That same day, John Lennon invited her to join the recording of Give Peace a Chance. His words became a lifelong reminder. Keep singing, music goes beyond division. Though her voice is barely audible in the final mix, she stood in that small studio, surrounded by artists and activists, helping create an immortal anthem for peace. Petula Clark also played a quiet role in discovering and supporting the Carpenters. She introduced them to Herb Alpert, who would go on to sign the duo. Behind the scenes, she quietly did the right thing, never seeking credit. Off stage, she chose creation over rebellion. On stage, she let music speak for her for over 60 years, more than 1,000 songs recorded, more than 6 decades without ever stepping away from the stage. She was awarded a CBE by Queen Elizabeth II in 1998 and named Commandeur des Arts et des Lettres by France in 2012, making her one of the rare artists honored simultaneously by both Europe and the English-speaking world. And though she was ranked 85th on VH1's list of the 100 greatest women of rock, perhaps her true legacy isn't in the numbers. It lies in the simple truth. She never walked away, and she never sang a dishonest note. At 92, Petula Clark hasn't retired. She's simply chosen stages that suit her better, not too loud, but deep enough to remind audiences she's still singing and still living. Clark now divides her time between 3 places: Geneva, where she has lived since the 1960s, a small flat in Chelsea, London, reserved for touring, and a mountain retreat in the Alps, where she skis and writes music during the winter. A peaceful rhythm, but far from idle. In 2010, she returned to the Las Vegas Hilton, once the setting of unforgettable backstage memories, this time as a performer fully in control. In 2013, she released the album Lost in You, which reached the UK Top 30. The track cut Copy Me from that album unexpectedly became a dance remix hit across Europe, entering the top 40, a remarkable achievement at age 80. In 2016, she recorded a live show in Berlin for IRTE to promote her album From Now On. 2 years later, she stunned the entertainment world with a 53-date US tour. No intermissions, no altered keys, no cancellations. From 2019 to early 2023, Petula Clark portrayed the Bird Woman in Mary Poppins on the West End. The performances took place at the Prince Edward Theatre, the same venue where, 77 years earlier, a 7-year-old Petula had first sung for British troops during the war. Her final performance in that role ended with a 4-minute standing ovation and a BBC video projected on stage, retracing 8 uninterrupted decades of her career. In 2024, she released the album Living for Today, featuring covers of classic tracks like the Beatles' Blackbird. The album received critical praise and proved that even in her 90s, Clark continues to reinvent herself. In 2025, She's scheduled to host a concert celebrating the 60th anniversary of Downtown topping the Billboard charts, an event set to be a major musical highlight of the year. She's also preparing to release her memoir, Is That You, Petula?, due in October, which promises to unveil many untold chapters of her life. Through her life journey, she has chosen to age naturally, never chasing youth through surgery or clinging to old fame. But every time she appears, Petula Clark still makes people look up. Because her timelessness isn't in her age. It's in her inner fire and joy of living, which have never once gone out. Petula Clark's story is more than a career retrospective. It is proof of a long, unwavering journey, defined by hard work, reinvention, and rising above the limits of time. If you believe that artists like Petula Clark still deserve to be remembered and heard, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next stories. When did you first hear Downtown? Share it in the comments, because musical memories are part of the story too. See you in the next video.